The floor of Dock Ring 9 was not merely cold. It was a patient thief, drawing heat through Sofia Garcia's knees, while the maintenance hatch above him slammed shut with a hydraulic crack that sounded like a verdict. Red alarm bars strobed across the cramped mop closet, washing the steel walls in pulses that made every shadow jump, and the false wall behind the solvent rack hissed as if exhaling after years of holding its breath. A seam of pale blue light widened, then unfolded into a projection field that painted the air with rotating star lanes, tight braided routes across dead sectors and radiation belts. No civilian chart acknowledged. Cipher seals flashed beside each corridor. Military sigils, ceasefire stamps, decommission marks from wars archived as finished history. The station's ventilation breathed hot coolant breath against his neck. Ozone, cleanser, scorched dust. His own sweat turned metallic on his tongue. He did not panic. Panic burned oxygen and options. Training had taught him that in a different uniform, in a different war, and the lesson had stayed after everything else was stripped away. In for 4, hold for 4, out for 4. His left hand shook anyway, a faint old current in the tendons that arrived when alarms mixed with enclosed metal and no clear exit path. He pressed his thumb against the mop cart handle until the knuckle blanched white, forcing sensation to replace memory. One solvent canister by his boot, 2 upright on the lower shelf, 1 rolling and tapping the bulkhead with each vibration from the overhead siren. 3 exposed bolt heads on the access panel. 1 duct vent too narrow for a human shoulder. The cart's battery read half charge. The closet door lock had switched from green service authorization to amber custody standby. He tracked all of it automatically. Inventory before emotion. Mechanics before fear. The projection sharpened. No decorative interface, no municipal logo, no error script. Raw route geometry and military layer stacks, each path tagged with casualty tolerance bands and supply burn rates. Somebody had built this map for fleets moving fast and desperate, not tourists or freight unions. Sofia leaned forward on instinct and immediately hated himself for it. Curiosity got laborers reassigned. Reassignment got laborers disappeared. He shifted his weight back, knees protesting against the ribbed deck plating, and snapped the telescoping wrench from his cart mount in one practiced motion. The grip settled into his palm like an old language. A janitor's tool in station records. Close quarters leverage tool in every other context. The siren pitch changed, climbing a half step into compliance mode. Dock Ring 9's public address mesh clicked alive through tinny speakers in the corridor outside, the voice flat and bureaucratic, genderless by design and somehow smug because of it. Cast tier transit restrictions now in effect. Remain in assigned lanes. Scent scanners deploying for contamination anomalies. Unauthorized data retention is prosecutable under Ward Protocol 9. The message repeated in trade cant, then in 2 predator tongues whose consonants scraped like claws on ceramic. Through the lower door seam, he watched shadows cross the corridor in hurried slices. Boots, digitigrade paws, one-wheeled drone cluster gliding past with antiseptic vapor curling in its wake. By the end of second shift that week, Dock Ring 9 had already run 3 random sweeps for forged permits and 1 for contraband biotech. But this alarm carried a different rhythm. Legal language first, movement restrictions second, and automated custody notices threaded through both. That sequence meant seizure operation. It also meant someone with authority had triggered protocol before notifying deck supervisors, which told him exactly where he stood in the equation. Not witness, not employee. Variable. The closet's false wall extended another centimeter and locked in place. A small biometric window opened at eye level, projected text racing in columns too fast to read in full. He caught fragments between flashes. Refugee corridors. Pre-collapse priority. Treaty. Audit suppression. Flag. Suppression. Not loss, not corruption. Active concealment. His stomach tightened so hard it felt like a fist under his ribs. Sophia had spent 6 years on maintenance decks where aristocrat officers drifted past him in polished boots and perfumed armor, never learning his name, never seeing the patched seam on his utility jacket or the way he logged every unsecured camera by habit. He had chosen boring as a survival strategy. Keep your head down. Scrub what everyone else stepped over. Sleep in service bunks, one sector under embassy light, and call that peace. Boring men did not accidentally kneel in front of ghost maps with military seals. Another pulse rattled the closet, harder this time, a muffled impact from somewhere down the bay. The projection flickered, then held. He braced one hand against the wall and counted breaths again, measuring the tremor in his forearm against the old combat rhythm that still rose without permission whenever metal boomed close by. In for 4, hold for 4, out for 4. The pulse in his ears decelerated from sprint to hard run. He listened, sorting layers. Alarm siren, vent fan, distant boots, a high insect buzz from the closet lock motor as it cycled through command overrides. It did not quite obey. And under all of it, the soft, granular hiss of the map itself, like static across frozen sand. He risked one step toward the doorway and touched the manual release. Dead. The panel gave him a red denial glyph and a legal citation number. Of course, he muttered, voice dry in his throat. Bureaucracy. Longer than a moon orbit and twice as cold. The line would have earned a snort from Rook in waste processing, maybe a thrown rag, maybe 2 seconds of normal life. Here, it only bounced off solvent bottles and came back smaller. Sophia crouched again, wrench resting across his thighs, and studied the projection, not as revelation but as hardware behavior. The map fed from a node hidden behind wall composite. The node required power. Power meant conduit. Conduit meant maintenance access eventually, and maintenance access was the one language this station still spoke to people like him. The corridor loudspeaker snapped to a new alert channel. All sanitation contractors on Dock Ring 9 hold position for identity verification. Not technicians, not contractors, sanitation contractors. Full classification, the bureaucratic equivalent of a finger pressing his head down into the deck. A second voice overrode it, sharper, officer level, then cut out before he caught more than Seal Bay C and custody drones. He closed his eyes once, briefly, seeing not darkness, but another corridor years ago, another lock cycling shut, while his unit count dropped from 12 to 5 in under 2 minutes. The memory arrived with smell before image, burnt polymer, ruptured coolant, iron. He opened his eyes before it could finish constructing itself and dragged focus back to the present wall in front of him. The projection zoomed without his touch. One route expanded into layered vectors crossing embargo space, then bent through ice moon shadows and dead relays toward outer colony belts he knew only from cargo manifests and casualty rumors. Civilian registries marked those belts as abandoned during the border campaigns. This map marked them as evacuation corridors, complete with fuel depots and med station fallback nodes. If true, somebody had moved people through fire and then erased the trail. If true, these were not just lanes, they were testimony. His gaze dropped to the corner of the display where authentication data scrolled. He expected generic maintenance token, the kind of accidental trigger old stations through when wiring degraded. Instead, he saw a clean biosignature hash resolve in real time and stamp itself over the access log. Garcia_Sophia/local authorized custodian. He read it twice, then a third time because disorientation had a way of making obvious things look invented. Local authorized custodian. The lock had not failed open. It had opened for him. The closet felt smaller at once, walls inching inward with every red pulse. Somebody had bound forbidden intelligence to a janitor in a cast-sealed station and either trusted him with history or selected him for disposal. Those were not distant possibilities. They were neighboring doors. Sophia rose to one knee, wrench in hand, and turned his head toward the hatch above as footsteps gathered outside the utility bay in disciplined, converging patterns. Too synchronized for frightened civilians, too heavy for housekeeping staff. The alarm strobes painted his knuckles red, then black, then red again, while the map behind him kept turning through silent corridors that had carried refugees through wars the records called over. He breathed in for 4, held for 4, and listened to Dockring 9 decide what he was. It decided quickly. The first knock on the hatch was not a knock at all, but a coded impact sequence. 3 hard strikes. A pause, 2 softer ones, then the whir of a portable scanner chewing through old paint layers. Sophia shifted his grip on the wrench and dropped his center of gravity. Knees bent, shoulders loose, the way his sergeant had drilled into him when bulkheads became choke points and breathing became a finite resource. He did not look at the hatch again. He looked at the floorbolts, at the maintenance cart, at the map projection still turning in pale blue arcs behind his left shoulder like a second sky trapped in a wall. In for 4, hold for 4, out for 4. The tremor in his hand eased by degrees, not gone, never gone, but reduced from lightning to static. He pressed 2 fingers against his neck and counted pulse beats against the alarm interval. Fast, then steadier. He rolled his jaw once until it clicked, stretched his left wrist, and recited the Oldfield sequence under his breath, barely audible over the siren. Air, exits, tools, cover, comms. Comms was 0. Exits was effectively 0. Tools and cover were ugly but workable. Air was still moving through the vent, hot and chemical, and that made every next choice possible. A strip of condensation crawled down the closet wall and dripped onto his sleeve. Dockring 9 always sweated under load. Coolant lines buried shallow behind thin plating because labor decks got budget cuts first and maintenance directives later. Sophia stepped sideways, avoiding the drip by habit, and pulled the cart closer with one smooth motion so he could use it as partial barricade if the door popped. The cart wheels squealed a complaint loud enough to make him wince. He froze for 2 breaths. No immediate response from outside. He moved again, slower. The hatch above barked under a second scanner pass. The corridor speaker snapped back to life. Identity verification in progress. Noncompliance constitutes obstruction. Remain visible. The instruction was designed for broad obedience, for crowds and bright corridors and workers too exhausted to question syntax. Remain visible while he was locked in a steel closet with no viewport. Sophia almost laughed at the elegance of it. If protocol demanded visibility and architecture denied it, the subject became non-compliant by default. Ward Protocol 9 did not need malice. It needed definitions. He crouched behind the cart and began a hands-only inventory, touching each item as if physical contact could anchor thought. 1 telescoping wrench, steel, balanced. 1 sealant gun, half cartridge. 1 foam dispersal canister for chemical spills. 2 microfiber rolls, useless except as noise dampers or smoke filters. one maintenance pad with cracked screen and local work orders cached offline, a handful of magnetic fasteners, 3 solvent bottles, flammable enough to matter in confined air, and therefore a last-ditch option he did not want. He tucked the fasteners into his jacket pocket and looped the microfiber around his wrist, not because he needed it now, but because rituals built rails in a spiraling mind. Another breath cycle. In for 4. Hold for 4. Out for 4. He angled the maintenance pad to the projection light and woke it with his thumbprint. The screen flickered, protested, then opened to sanitation route logs and supply requisitions. No station net as expected. Compliance mode often cut labor deck connectivity first to stop rumor vectors. But local diagnostics still worked, and local diagnostics were enough if he kept the problem small. He opened utility schematics for this corridor cluster and overlaid them against what he remembered from years of replacing filters and unclogging line traps that no officer had ever noticed. Closet 23 sat between a gray water trunk and a decommissioned cable chase. One thin conduit ran from the false wall into a locked junction behind panel C17 in the adjoining bay. So the map had power from outside the closet. He exhaled slowly and let that fact settle. Whoever built the cache had not intended a cleanroom vault. They had intended reach. Reach meant maintenance access. Maintenance access meant fingerprints from his world, not theirs. He touched the panel seam near his knee and felt a faint vibration through the metal, regular as a heartbeat. Active current. He tracked it with his palm along the wall until the frequency changed near the lower corner, where old patch compound had been painted over in a hurry. New work disguised as old work. The kind of repair done by people who feared inspection but trusted labor traffic to hide them. The footsteps outside sorted themselves into categories as his ears adjusted. Heavy heel impacts from custody drones with magnetic treads. Lighter 2-beat patterns from station security in hard-sole boots. A fourth sound, intermittent, talon click on deck grating, likely one of the predator species officers pulled from upper tiers now that classification was involved. Their voices came filtered through door seams and structural ribs, clipped and irritated. Zone C still reads cross-scent contamination. From sanitation stock. From a live source. Human baseline plus unknown overlays. Then isolate the bay and run thermal. Thermal. Sophia shut his eyes once and pictured the closet as a geometry problem, not a trap. Thermal scanners would paint him bright if they had direct line through the door, less so through stacked solvents and dense cart plating. Not invisible, but noisier. He shoved 2 solvent crates to the cart's front and crouched in the pocket behind them, making himself one more heat mass among many. The move pinched his shoulder and sent pain down his arm. He ignored it. By the 9th alarm cycle, sweat had soaked the back of his jacket despite the cold floor. He checked the hatch bolts again, then the lower door track, then the false wall projection in that order, and repeated the sequence because repetition narrowed panic into procedure. The map rotated to a new sector and highlighted 3 nodes in amber. Each node carried an annotation stamp he had not seen on public infrastructure in years. Child, Med, Evac, Priority. The letters struck harder than the alarms, not because he had kids waiting in a bunk somewhere. He did not. Because he had once watched an overloaded shuttle captain choose between med pods and fuel drums, while artillery walked toward the field in bright, indifferent lines. Bureaucracy called those events resource allocations. People who had been there called them nights they still woke from. Stay here, he told himself, voice low. Stay useful. His thumb hovered over the maintenance pad's report function. File anonymous hazard ticket. Unauthorized electrical load in sanitation bay. Harmless wording. Plausible deniability. He built the draft, attached local conduit diagnostics, and stopped before sending. In compliance lock, every ticket routed through ward filters before human supervisors saw it. Sending now could flag this closet, this exact closet, with his identifier attached. Not sending left him blind beyond the door. Trade-off. Ugly either way. He saved the draft offline and encrypted it under a mundane label. Mop head inventory variants. If he got a window later, he could blast it to 3 departments at once and force bureaucratic collision. The projection chimed, a tiny, clean tone that cut through the siren like glass. Text populated in a narrow vertical column. Custodian presence confirmed. Auth seat stable. Retention timer active. He scanned for duration and found it in the footer. Dawn cycle -2 hours, 13 minutes. Not a lot, but no longer abstract. A clock turned, fear into arithmetic. He shifted position and dragged the foam dispersal canister closer with his foot. The nozzle was built for chemical suppression, not combat, but foam-blinded optics and clogged intake grills for several seconds, and several seconds sometimes paid for a life. He tested the safety tab with his thumb, then reset it and placed the canister where his left hand could find it without looking. Wrench right, foam left, cart as cover, map at his back. He had worked with worse loadouts. Outside, a drone issued a descending chirp, and the corridor lights dropped from red strobe to a hard white sweep that leaked under the door in brutal bands. Thermal pass beginning. Sophia tucked his chin, slowed his breathing, and counted again, this time with the scanner pulse. 1, 2, 3, hold. 1, 2, 3, hold. His lungs burned at the edges, but the rhythm gave his hands a job, and jobs kept ghosts out. The pass slid over the closet. He could feel it as a faint pressure on skin. Psychosomatic maybe, maybe not. The scanner paused on his door for one fraction too long, then moved on. Voices followed. Signal clutter from solvents. Flag for later. Later gets us audited. Then write a better memo. Boots receded, replaced by the soft whirl of a cleaning drone that had no idea it was now patrol support. Sophia let one breath leave him in a shaky thread and immediately recentered before relief could avalanche into carelessness. Surviving one sweep only meant the next sweep had data. He opened his eyes and studied the closet as if seeing it for the first time, not as workplace but as node in a hostile system. Smell profile: ammonia, metal dust, wet insulation, and a sweet medicinal note riding above everything else from the false wall emitter. Sound profile: alarm mesh, duct rattle, distant transit brakes, periodic scanner chirps. Social profile: labor deck jurisdiction with upper-tier override authority during protocol activation, which meant anyone with the right badge could walk in and write his fate while never meeting his eyes. He mapped each layer the way other people mapped constellations. Threat mapping was never only about hardware. It was about people shaped by rules. Security officers from upper decks would default to containment over dialogue because containment protected careers. Custody drones would follow seizure trees blind to context because context was not in their firmware. Labor supervisors might try to intervene, but only after their own liability teams cleared language, which would take longer than this timer allowed. The one class of actor with both speed and discretion was intelligence, and intelligence did not move without motive. If intelligence had buried the map, intelligence might be here to erase it. If a rival cell had planted it for exposure, they might be watching to see who touched it. His name on the custodian tag made him visible to both. He zoomed the maintenance schematic and traced adjacent access ways with his fingertip, turning corridors into options. Utility bay C had 2 legal doors, one sealed now, one likely about to seal. The old cable chase behind panel C17 ran toward filter room 9, then split under a stairwell into a narrow service artery no custody drone could traverse without disassembly. Human shoulder clearance barely. If he could reach it, he could reposition without crossing open corridor. Problem: his closet door was still locked from outside command, and the hatch above was dead-bolted. No route yet, but routes changed when multiple agencies contested a scene. His job was to stay alive long enough for contest to begin. By the time the station chronometer rolled into the next minute, the alarms had settled into a steadier cadence, less panic signal, and more institutional heartbeat. The transition told him the first scramble was ending and the paperwork phase had started, which was more dangerous in its own slow way. Paperwork made decisions durable. Durable decisions turned people into entries. A new message flickered on the maintenance pad, not through network but piggybacking on the closet's hidden emitter. Hold position. Do not disclose map to custody units. Authority en route. No signature. No source header. No way to validate in the time available. Sophia stared at the words, jaw tight, then deleted the display from immediate memory cache and forced himself to think in branches instead of faith. If genuine, compliance bought survival. If trap, compliance still might buy minutes while hostile units sorted chain of command. If he ignored it and opened the wall manually, he risked corrupting the data he did not understand. Unknown sender, unknown intent, known clock. He chose the path he could defend to himself later, preserve evidence, preserve body, preserve options. He braced the cart tighter against the door track, set the wrench across his thigh, and angled his head toward the corridor where new footsteps approached, measured and unhurried, the gait of someone accustomed to being obeyed before speaking. The hidden map cast pale roots across the closet ceiling like frost veins, while Dockring 9, with all its rules and scents and polished lies, drew a smaller and smaller circle around him. The footsteps stopped outside his door, and the corridor went so quiet that the alarm mesh sounded suddenly far away, like weather on another deck. A hard light cursor swept under the threshold, paused on his boots, then climbed the cart's shadow, and stuttered out. Someone on the other side spoke a command in clipped station cant, not loud, not rushed, and the closet lock answered with a tone Sophia had never heard from sanitation hardware. Executive override, triple keyed. The bolt retracted. He rose in one motion, wrench low by his thigh, left hand hovering near the foam canister nozzle, shoulders angled so the cart shielded his centerline. Cold air spilled in from the utility bay, carrying machine oil, sterilant and a sharp, musky note that didn't belong on labor decks. The hatch opened halfway, then fully, and Director Varya Thorne filled the doorway in matte black command armor, stripped of ceremony and built for movement, rank insignia dull enough to avoid glare, silver cuff seals coded to Intelligence Directorate and nobody else. She was taller than him by a handspan, all controlled mass and predatory economy, dark fur, braided tight behind one pointed ear to keep it clear of a comm implant that glowed faint amber. Her gloves were off. Her claws were not extended, but he could see the polished crescents at each fingertip when she lifted one hand and shut the hatch behind her without looking. Sophia's grip tightened on the wrench. Her gold eyes tracked it, then tracked his breathing, then flicked once to the projection wall and hardened. Garcia, keep the 4 count. No greeting, no threat. Just that, like she had stepped into his skull and read his metronome. He did not lower the tool. You lock me in my own closet and call me by name. That usually goes one direction. Not tonight. Her voice was low, military precise, with the rough edge of someone running on pain suppressants and discipline. I locked everyone out. Difference matters. Outside, treads whispered over deck plating. Custody drones, at least 2. Varya angled her body half a degree, enough to block line of sight through the doorway if anything scanned inside. She palmed a wafer-thin jammer against the doorframe, and the ambient siren dropped 3 decibels, replaced in the closet by a soft, white hiss, as if someone had packed the walls with snow. Sophia kept his eyes on her hands. If this is an interrogation, it needs better furniture. It's not an interrogation. She stepped once toward the projection, nostrils flaring as the map cycled to another lane bundle. It's a retention event. These routes are pre-collapse refugee corridors. They were used during withdrawal years, then removed from civilian archives, military appendices, and treaty disclosure packets. He felt the sentence land in him in 3 separate hits. Refugee, removed, treaty. Removed by accident. Her ear twitched once. No. She reached toward the floating star lanes, stopped short of touching, and keyed a command on her wrist. The projection split, overlaying casualty densities, medevac priorities, and convoy timestamps. What had looked like geometry became movement and bodies, fuel loads and child triage allotments, and routes threaded through radiation shadows where official history said no traffic had survived. The closet seemed to tilt. "Why me?" Sophia asked. His voice came out rougher than he intended. "That wall used my biosignature. I didn't know it was there." "Because your signature sits outside ministry hierarchy." She looked at him again, direct, unblinking. "Anyone in command tiers trips auto-seizure under Ward 9 the instant they authenticate unregistered intelligence caches. Labor deck custodians do not. Someone who understood protocol architecture planted a legal hinge and chose a person the system understates." "A person the system can discard," he said. "Usually." Her jaw tightened. "Not if I'm standing here when audit triggers." The map pulsed amber. Retention timer, 2 hours, 9 minutes. He lowered the wrench by a few centimeters. Not surrender, just recalibration. "You're telling me this closet is now a legal battleground." "I'm telling you this closet is now evidence under live dispute, and dispute is the only thing preventing automatic destruction." She tapped her wrist again. "Listen carefully. If custody units seize the core as contraband, Ward 9 purges it. If Intelligence Directorate claims immediate control, Ward 9 purges it pending chain review. If independent treaty monitors receive verified duplicate while custodians remain on site, purge authority freezes." Sophia gave her a thin look. "That sounds like a game designed by people who never touched a mop." "It was designed by people who never expected a mop closet to hold a war." For the first time, a sliver of something not iron crossed her expression. Not softness, exactly, but fatigue with teeth. "I need your access continuity. You need my rank firewall. We both need 90 clean seconds on a very hostile station." The drones outside halted near the door. Their optical units emitted a high crystalline trill as they negotiated authority channels. Varya's ears rotated toward the sound. She raised one finger to silence him, then transmitted in a fast wolf dialect cadence through her cuffcom, voice switching from low to command cold in 2 syllables. He caught only fragments. Contamination sweep. Coolant shaft breach. Reroute. Now. The drone trill shifted, confused, then receded down bay with magnetic thumps that grew faint. Sophia blinked once. "You just lied to them." "I issued a high-priority hazard correction." Her teeth showed for a heartbeat, almost a smile and not friendly. "Truth is a matter of packet timing. At 3:17 dock ring time, The corridor lights snapped from hard white to amber maintenance mode, signaling a sector reroute in progress. She moved past him into the closet's narrow centerline and crouched by the false wall seam, one knee on freezing steel, rank insignia inches from his battered cartwheel. Up close, he saw fine tremors in her left hand she kept hidden by bracing 2 fingers against the deck. Antiseptic scent, yes, and something copper sour beneath it, neural stabilizer gel. Pain management, not injury dressing. She keyed another sequence and drew up access logs. Your entry was the first organic trigger in 6 years, she said. No remote probes, no test pings. Whoever set this wanted a single event and then a cascade. He crouched opposite her without deciding to. Cascade to what? To treaty hearing collapse, probably. If these corridors surface without authenticated chain, ministries call fabrication and bury it again. If they vanish tonight, no one proves they existed. Either way, the outer colonies stay footnotes. He looked at the rotating routes and remembered medevac tags glowing over black ice belts. You sound like you've rehearsed that failure. I have lived adjacent to it. The words came flat, then sharpened. Do not mistake that for surrender. A new sound cut through the jammer hiss, above and to the left, scratching metal, rapid, deliberate. Not boots, not treads. Something in the ventilation trunk indexing toward their heat signatures. Varya stood instantly, pain forgotten or postponed, and drew a palm-sized cylinder from a slot in her belt. Duct ingress, 2 units minimum. Sophia shifted with her, wrench up now. Foam canister clipped in his other hand. They find us. They classify me as contamination and you as compromised. They classify us as resolved. She thumbed the cylinder cap. A sweet, sharp pheromone compound hit the air, layered and complex, predator command signatures tangled with biohazard markers. When I throw this, stay low. The vent grill above the mop rack exploded inward in a shower of screws and bent mesh. 2 custody drones dropped from the trunk on articulated legs, lenses opening like mechanical pupils, stun prongs unfolding with polite lethal intent. Sophia planted his feet to meet them. Varya moved first. She slapped the hatch control with her wrist. The lock unsealed and the door kicked open a handspan on emergency glide. She hurled the cylinder, not at the drones, but through the half-open hatch into the corridor. It struck plating and burst in a silent mist that rolled low and fast. Both drones pivoted at once, optics flaring as their threat trees reordered around the decoy profile. Varya lunged, caught the front drone by its sensor crown, and redirected its momentum into the wall hard enough to scramble its gyros without breaking the shell. The second unit sprang toward where Sophia had been standing a fraction earlier. Varya's forearm slammed across his chest and hauled him backward behind armored shelving in one brutal, efficient movement that stole his balance and gave it back in cover. The drone snapped shut on empty air and launched after the pheromone plume instead, clattering through the hatch toward the corridor. Sophia hit one knee behind the shelf, breath punched out of him, wrench still in hand because old reflexes did not negotiate. Varya braced above him, one clawed hand on the steel edge, listening to the drones chase false prey down bay. Only when the sound had moved the 2 corridors away did she ease pressure on his shoulder. He looked up at her, chest heaving against the 4-count, adrenaline making everything too bright. Great, he said, dragging air through a half-laugh that came out frayed. Even my closet has rank now. Her mouth twitched. The expression was brief and startled, like she had found humor in a place she did not permit it. Your closet has better tactical geometry than most command suites. Add it to my performance review. I already did. The line should have sounded like a joke. It didn't. She keyed her cuff and the hatch sealed fully, thicker bolts engaging with a punchy mechanical thunk. Then, she turned her wrist so we could see the display. Emergency custodial co-authorization initiated. Local custodian. Garcia_Sophia. Guardian officer. Thorn_Varya. Continuous presence required. Sophia stared. You just tied your badge to a sanitation contractor. I tied it to the evidence. Her eyes held his. And to the only person this cache opened for. In the corridor, distant shouts rose as competing units argued over the false hazard vector. In the closet, Maplight painted both their faces in ghost blue bands while the timer kept counting down, steady and indifferent. Sophia pushed to his feet, rolled his sore shoulder once, and reset his grip on the wrench to something less like fear and more like work. Then tell me where you want your command post, Director, he said. Try not to trip over the mop bucket. It outranks all of us. Then don't make me salute it, Varya said, and the dry edge in her voice nearly passed for normal until she reached for the cart to steady herself and missed by 2 centimeters. Sophia saw the miss, saw the tiny recoil in her jaw as she corrected, and saw the way her left hand curled toward her ribs as if trying to hide inside the armor seam. The projection light sharpened every flaw she had been holding off by force. The tremor she'd masked with command cadence, the antiseptic sheen on her wrist, where a patch injector had been slapped on too fast, the slight dilation in her pupils that matched stimulant drift and pain suppression colliding in ugly chemistry. Outside the closet, Dockring 9 was still shouting through steel and protocol. Inside, her breathing shortened to clipped pulls she would have mocked in anyone under her command. He set the wrench down within reach but not in his grip, then nudged the mop bucket aside with his boot to clear space. Sit, he said. I do not sit during active seizure events. Then fall in a more professional posture if you want, but pick one. He kept his tone flat, practical, no pity in it. Your hands shaking through the gauntlet. Her ears pinned halfway back, a flash of rank pride heat. Then she exhaled hard through her nose and lowered herself onto an overturned supply crate like she was conceding territory one molecule at a time. Up close, the musk of ozone and fur carried a bitter undernote of neural burn medicine. She removed one gauntlet and flexed her fingers once. Fine luminescent lines spidered beneath the skin along her forearm. Not scars exactly, more like overclocked biointerface conduits running too hot. He had seen similar patterns in comm specialists after long-range link trauma, human and otherwise. Neural feedback? He asked. Old damage, managed. She said it like doctrine. Then, after a beat, not always well. The map rotated and threw amber medevac tags across her cheekbones. Sophia crouched opposite her, forearms on his knees, and gave her the same silence he used on men having a bad night in barracks years ago. Room to speak. No demand. She watched the routes instead of him. My litter siblings made it out on Corridor Branch Kestrel 7 during the withdrawal. Her voice lost some iron and became something rougher, lower. Official records list them as transferred through sanctioned convoy gates near Voss Halo. Those gates were under bombardment that week. The timestamps cannot be true. They were never true. Sophia did not interrupt. Someone built these lanes through debris shadows and dead relay zones, she continued. Unofficial pilots, mechanics, sanitation crews, freight handlers, people below rank class. They moved children, med staff, old civilians, then erased themselves because survival required invisibility. Her claws clicked softly against the crate edge. Years later, ministries used the clean version of history to argue there was no abandonment, no withheld rescue capacity, no selective triage by cast value. If these maps authenticate, that argument collapses. The siren outside dipped, then resumed in a lower register. He filed the change automatically. Central command shifting from sweep mode to adjudication mode. She swallowed, and he caught the smallest hitch in her throat before she flattened it. I was assigned to Interior Intelligence by then, too junior to veto, senior enough to read traffic they thought I couldn't decode. I signed redaction packets I told myself were temporary seal orders pending review. The words came quicker now, as if, once the lock broke, pressure took over. Pending review became permanent archive burial. I slept in 20-minute intervals for 2 cycles after that. Then, not at all without suppressants. You weren't the architect, Sophia said. No. Her gaze snapped to him, bright and hard. But my signature exists on one suppression chain. Under coercive command language, yes. Under legal duress, yes. Still my signature. So when this cache pinged and attached to your biosignature, I had 2 options. Contain you and preserve the lie, or stand in this closet and gamble my career, my ministry, and whatever rank insulation I still own. He held her stare for a second, then reached to the shelf and handed her an unopened hydration ampule. Drink. Talking dries you out. That almost smile returned, thinner this time, but real. She bit the cap, drank half, and set it down with deliberate care. The tremor in her hand eased by a fraction. At 3:24 dockering time, 8 minutes after her co-authorization stamp, the corridor alarm shifted to a 2-tone pulse that marked formal ward review. Varia keyed her cuff and brought up a legal lattice in the air between them. Continuous Guardian Watch Clause is active. To keep it active, both custodians must remain inside one registered residential boundary or one declared evidence boundary. This closet qualifies as evidence boundary but fails life support comfort threshold inside 40 minutes. The system will force relocation. She angled the display. Your maintenance quarters are the nearest qualifying residential boundary with independent utility junctions. We move the portable core there under sealed chain. By main corridor, he asked. No. Too visible. Too many badges wanting headlines. She rubbed 2 fingers against her temple, then steadied again. There's a service artery behind filter room 9. You already looked at it. I saw your schematic cache when I linked. He snorted once. You read my homework. I vetted my partner. Partner. The word sat between them. Heavier than flirtation, lighter than oath, exactly as dangerous as truth. He rose and started working before either of them had to parse it. Cart-centered, loose items strapped, foam canister clipped, maintenance pad secured in chest pocket. He pulled a thermal wrap from a chemical spill kit and held it out to her. Around your forearm. It'll damp the radiant spikes and keep scanners from seeing your conduits flaring. She took it, eyes narrowing with quick reassessment. You've done counterscan prep before? I've done stay-off badly tuned machine attention my whole adult life. He moved to the false wall and examined the projection base. The hidden node sat behind composite under a service plate disguised as structural reinforcement, fixed with tamper screws meant to punish ordinary tools. A janitor's telescoping wrench with a magnetic bit extension, however, was not ordinary if you knew where to press and how not to strip the head. He angled the shaft, counted pressure in his fingers, and turned each screw a quarter rotation in cross pattern so the plate released cleanly without warping the socket. Behind it, the core housing glowed dim violet, pulse syncing with the map's rotation. Compact, military grade, shock mounted. Varia leaned in close enough that he could feel heat off her shoulder through his jacket. Can you hot transfer without registry ping? Not transfer. Cradle and preserve. He pointed with the wrench tip. If we break this cradle circuit under load, it flags as tamper and fries itself. I need a parallel power feed before disconnect. She looked at the cart battery, then back at him. That antique? This antique runs 12-hour sanitation shifts pulling grime off aristocrat decks. It has stubborn virtues. He built the bridge in 3 motions practiced from years of illegal but necessary repairs. No one wanted to budget. Insulated clips from the sealant gun case, stripped lead from a dead floor polisher cable, then a solvent-damp microfiber wrapped as makeshift dielectric spacer to prevent arc kiss when he mated contacts. Varya fed him cufflight at exactly the right angle without being asked. When his hands started to tremble on the 3rd clip, he reset with his ritual under his breath. In for 4, hold for 4, out for 4. The tremor dropped to manageable. Power in 3, he said. 1, 2, now. The cart battery accepted the load with a deep electrical hum and a smell like hot copper pennies. The core pulse held steady. No tamper alarm. No purge cascade. He exhaled and finally looked up. Still with me? He asked. Varya's ears were forward again, alert and intent. Fully. Good. On my mark, we lift together. No tilting past 10 degrees. They lifted. The core was heavier than it looked, dense with shielding. He felt her strength compensate instantly when his right wrist threatened to buckle. They nested the unit in the mop bucket after he yanked the ringer assembly free and padded the interior with folded microfiber rolls. It would have been funny in another life. One of the most contested intelligence artifacts on the station, riding in a scuffed sanitation bucket with a faded caution sticker. He locked the bucket to the cart frame with magnetic fasteners, tested sway, then opened the closet door 2 centimeters and listened. Voices farther down bay arguing in clipped legalese. No immediate treads. He glanced back at her. Can you run fast if we need it? He asked. Can you? Only when someone higher rank lies about my overtime. Her tail flicked once, a quick, involuntary sign of amusement he pretended not to see. She raised her cuff and sent a narrowband ping through her encrypted channel. External contact. Operations clerk I trust to hate me later and obey now. I just filed a mandatory sanitation emergency escort for chemical leak containment from Bay C to residential stack 12. That gives us legal movement cover for 12 minutes. Will it hold? It will annoy 3 departments and trigger 1 supervisor callback. Bureaucracy trips over itself when forms disagree. As if summoned by prophecy, Sophia's maintenance pad buzzed in his pocket with a local call request from Deck Sanitation Dispatch. He looked at her. She nodded once. He answered on speaker at low volume. Dispatch came through as a tired voice he recognized, Mira from second shift, chewing words like she was holding a wrench in her teeth. Garcia, I've got an emergency escort request stamped under your tag and director-level countersignature I don't even want to understand. Are you currently upright and not on fire? Upright, he said. Fire status pending station politics. Mira snorted. Copy that. I'm logging you as hazardous material transfer. Route lights should flip green in 30 seconds if Central doesn't choke. If someone in shiny armor asks, you are carrying reactive degreaser and my last nerve. Received. Also, Garcia? Yeah? Try not to die in a paperwork event. Makes audits awkward. The line cut. External contact resolved, immediate and human. Sophia pocketed the pad, and 1 breath later the corridor strip outside the closet shifted from amber lockout to a narrow green guidance line hugging the baseboard. The kind reserved for maintenance hazard transport. Varya looked at him, and for the first time since she entered, the command mask sat over something steadier than force. Trust. Not declared, but operational. He drew the cart into the corridor. The wheel bearings complained softly. The core in the bucket hummed under microfiber like a contained storm. The deck smelled of coolant, disinfectant, and the stale fear of people pretending process could replace conscience. He kept his pace ordinary, not too fast, not furtive, just a janitor moving equipment because that was what janitors did when stations panicked. At the first intersection, 2 security officers in polished gray turned toward them. One opened her mouth to challenge. Varya did not even slow. She flashed her cuff seal and said, "Hazard escort under my authority. Delay us and sign your own contamination liability." The officers stepped back on reflex, protocol instinct beating curiosity by a full second. Sophia hid his grin and kept pushing. Practical competence was rarely dramatic on the surface. Mostly, it looked like knowing which bolt would shear, which panel was lying, which form number made armed professionals hesitate, and which breathing count kept your hands steady long enough to matter. By the time they reached the service hatch behind filter room 9, he had the cart angle memorized for the narrow turn. The core's weight shift mapped to each wheel seam, and Varya's stride matched to his so tightly they moved like a 2-person machine, built in a hurry and holding together anyway. He keyed the hatch with his sanitation badge. It opened into the dark artery exactly as the schematic promised, smelling of dust, warm wiring, and old rain trapped in metal. He glanced back once at the corridor, then guided the cart inside while Varya sealed the hatch behind them and set her hand briefly, deliberately, on the cart handle beside his. "Lead, Garcia," she said. "I'll guard the history." The service artery swallowed the corridor noise as soon as the hatch sealed, turning official shouting into a distant pressure thrum and replacing it with close sounds that mattered. The cartwheel ticking over weld seams, Varya's controlled breathing behind him, and the low electrical hum from the map core hidden under microfiber in a mop bucket that smelled faintly of citrus degreaser and hot copper. Sophia kept one hand on the cart and the other brushing the conduit wall, reading the space through skin. The passage had been built for cable bundles and regretted retrofits, not people. Dust layered the pipes in velvet gray. Condensation beaded on insulation wraps and dropped in slow intervals that tapped his collar like a metronome. Every 6 meters, a maintenance diode blinked weak amber, then died back, just enough light to suggest depth, and no more. He moved at a janitor's pace, ordinary and unremarkable, because panic had a gait, and scanners were trained to recognize it, even when humans pretended they were machines. Behind him, Varya's claws clicked once against the cart handle when they hit a narrow bend. "You favor your right side when you're tired," she said quietly. "You analyze everyone under stress." "I survive by pattern recognition." Same trade, different pay bracket. Her breath shifted, almost a laugh, then tightened again as a neural spike caught her. He heard it in the tiny hitch she could not fully hide, the way her stride shortened by half a step. He did not turn immediately. Tight passages punished sudden movement. At the next junction flange, he stopped, set the cart brake, and looked back. She was upright, eyes clear, but her left hand had clenched hard enough that claw tips scored shallow crescents into the thermal wrap on her forearm. Her ears were angled forward by will, not comfort. The amber diode above her made the pain lines under her skin glow like buried circuitry. "4 count," he said. She met his gaze, pride bristling for 1 second, then nodded once. "Count it." He leaned shoulder to conduit and spoke low, steady, the cadence he used for himself when old ghosts tried to crowd the room. "In for 4, hold for 4, out for 4, again, in for 4, hold for 4, out for 4. By the third cycle, her jaw unclenched. By the fifth, her claws retracted enough to spare the wrap. She did not thank him right away. Command officers were taught that gratitude could be read as weakness by the wrong eyes. Instead, she stepped close, reached past him, and adjusted the cart battery lead where vibration had started to walk it loose. Her knuckles brushed his wrist in the dark, deliberate and unflinching. "Your bridge was drifting," she said. "Now it isn't." It landed as thanks anyway. He checked the lead, felt the tighter connection, and gave a short nod. "You just saved us a core brownout and a very expensive apology." "I do not apologize to dead protocols." "Healthy boundary." They moved again. The artery narrowed to a crawl space, where a collapsed insulation panel forced them single file with the cart canted on 2 wheels. Sophia stripped off his jacket, folded it into a wedge, and slid it under the axle to keep the frame from scraping sparks. Varya braced her shoulder to the cart and took more weight than physics should have allowed given her condition. When his boots slipped on algae-slick plating, she caught the back of his harness in one hand and held him steady until he found traction. No commentary, no rank language, just action. At 3:39 dockring time, his maintenance pad vibrated against his chest with a priority ping from Varya's operations clerk. He angled the screen toward her. She read while walking. "Contestation filed," she said. "Ministry Legal has challenged my emergency co-authorization as scope abuse. They requested immediate handover to Central Evidence Vault." Sophia kept pushing. "Which is exactly where Ward 9 can erase it with polite paperwork." "Yes." Her lip curled briefly, almost feral. Clerk Leth added a procedural hole by citing contamination chain uncertainty. "We have 11 minutes before arbitration AI reviews the hold. Tell Leth I owe them a month of coffee rations and my firstborn mop." She keyed a reply without breaking stride. "I told them you offered both and your best wrench." "Too far. Negotiations require leverage." The line of her mouth softened for a heartbeat after she sent it. There it was again. That strange equilibrium forming between them. Her precision, his improvisation, both of them running on too little sleep and too much consequence. In cleaner circumstances, it might have looked like friendship beginning. Here, it looked like dependency admitted under duress, and therefore more honest than most alliances he had ever seen. The artery opened into a vertical maintenance trunk with ladder rungs bolted into the wall and a cargo lift plate long dead from budget neglect. Sophia set the cart brake and scanned anchor points. "We lower it by hand," he said. 2 rung descent. Pause. 2 rung descent. Keep the bucket level or the core slam sidewall. Varya looked down the shaft, then back at him. "If one of us slips?" "We don't. But if we do, I take the drop and you keep the core off the floor." Her eyes went flat gold. "Negative. It's math. I'm easier to patch than that data." She stepped into his space, close enough that he caught the clean metal scent of her armor, heated by exertion. "Listen carefully, Garcia. You are not expendable hardware. You are co-custodian under my claim and under treaty amnesty pre-trigger. I lose either and this operation collapses." Claim. The word was formal in her dialect, legal as much as personal, and he felt it settle into his ribs like a brace. No one in command tiers had used language that put his survival in the same sentence as mission integrity without a footnote attached. He gave one short nod. "Then we both stay upright." "We both stay upright," she echoed. They rigged a sling from spill netting and cable ties. Sophia descended first with the guide rope wrapped around his forearm. Varya fed line with perfect tension control despite the tremor returning in her left hand. Halfway down, the rope bit through his glove and burned a stripe across his palm. He hissed and adjusted. Above, she shifted instantly to compensate, taking more load until the cart steadied. When his boots hit lower decking, she did not release until he gave 2 sharp tugs in the agreed signal. She came down after, landing in a crouch that would have made training instructors proud and medics furious. He reached up without thinking. She accepted the hand without comment and let him pull her through the last half-meter. Her grip was warm, calloused, stronger than it looked. She released only after her balance locked. "Add this to your report," he said, flexing his stinging palm. "Human janitor used as organic pulley." "Denied," she said. "Report will state, co-custodian executed controlled ascent under adverse infrastructure." Very heroic. Very accurate. By the time they reached the hatch to residential stack 12, the map core hum had deepened, drawing more current from the battery as its encryption routine cycled. Sophia keyed his badge, then overrode with manual code when the reader lagged. The hatch opened into the back corridor of labor housing. Warm, recycled air, boiled grain from someone's late meal, detergent, tired voices behind thin doors. Familiar territory, but tonight every sound carried threat edges because authority rarely came this low unless it wanted a witness or a scapegoat. His quarters sat 3 doors down, Unit 12C, painted the same indifferent gray as every other box on the deck. He got the door open on first try and rolled the cart inside. Varya entered backward, scanning the corridor until the lock engaged. The hydraulic seal sounded like a held breath finally released. The room was narrow and practical. Fold-down bunk, 2 metal chairs, 1 wall shelf of repair manuals and contraband paperbacks, kettle patched with a universal fuse, and a ventilation grill that rattled when central pressure fluctuated. Varya took it in with one fast sweep, reading vulnerabilities the way he read corroded bolts. No judgment in her face, only assessment. "Defensible," she said. "That's the nicest thing anyone said about this place." He cleared the small table, and they transferred the core from bucket to surface cradle, improvised from stacked towels and shock pads. He rewired the battery feed through a voltage smoother, built from his spare heater coil. Varya patched her cuff directly to the core and opened a secure relay tunnel to treaty monitors. The room lights flickered once as load redistributed, then steadied. She swayed. He caught her elbow before she could pretend it hadn't happened. Her muscles tensed under his hand, then eased when she recognized who had touched her. Not fear, not dominance. Consent in a crisis, quick and explicit. "Sit," he said again, softer this time. She sat on the edge of his bunk, spine straight by habit, and let him tape a fresh cooling strip over the neural conduits in her forearm. He worked with careful fingers, practical and precise. When he finished, she turned her arm, testing flexion, then looked up at him with that same hard gold focus, now threaded with something warmer and more dangerous because it asked for nothing scripted. "In my culture," she said, "operational trust is marked physically so no one can misreport the bond chain. No blood ritual, no spectacle, just intent." Before he could answer, she lifted his burned palm between both of hers and pressed her claws flat, sheathed and harmless, against the heel of his hand. The contact was firm, deliberate, long enough to register as oath. "I accept you as partner custodian," she said. "If command challenges your standing, they challenge mine." He held the contact, steady. "Then I accept the same." If labor deck rumor says you used me as cover, they answer to me first. A quiet breath left her, almost relief. She released his hand, but the room did not return to what it had been before. The pad on the table chimed a harsh triple tone. External conflict arrived exactly on schedule. Varya snapped to the core feed while Sophia took the pad. 2 alerts bloomed at once. First, Arbitration AI had voided Clerk Leth's hold and issued transfer enforcement to Central Vault. Second, Ward Protocol 9 had escalated their unit to contamination quarantine and initiated life support governance review for residential Stack 12, including atmosphere throttling authority, pending compliance. Sophia read it twice, anger cooling into focus. They're squeezing the whole stack to force handover. Varya's ears flattened. Structural coercion through public safety language. Predictable. He opened building diagnostics. If they throttle airflow here, neighbors start getting dizzy in 8 minutes, getting panic in 12. I won't let this deck pay for our evidence. Agreed. She was already transmitting. I'm filing emergency injunction on collective punishment grounds. Will injunction outrun protocol? No. She looked up, eyes sharp. But legal friction may delay execution by 90 seconds. 90's a lifetime if you spend it well. He moved fast, dragging his spare filter cartridges from under the bunk and snapping open the wall vent panel. Residential stacks used cheap distributed scrubbers tied to a central control spine. Central could starve flow, but local fans still had override windows during fire prevention cycles. He could piggyback those windows if he spoofed particulate alarms in the right sequence. Varya rose from the bunk, steadier now, and took position at the door with sidearm drawn but lowered, listening for corridor movement. I have traffic on building security channel, she said. 2 enforcement clerks, 4 custody drones, 1 adjudicator drone. ETA 3 minutes. 3 minutes is generous. He stripped wire with his teeth, patched leads, and shoved the connector home. Need me to barricade? Not yet. Barricades signal guilt to bureaucracy. She touched her comm. Mira from dispatch is pushing a maintenance integrity notice to every unit in this stack. If residents manually engage local scrubber test at once, central throttle appears as system fault, not targeted action. He glanced over his shoulder, surprised and impressed. You just weaponized tenant compliance. I weaponized procedure literacy. A brief, fierce glint crossed her face. Your friend Mira provided the spark. As if answering, corridor speakers crackled alive with Mira's exhausted voice, amplified building-wide. Attention Stack 12. Mandatory air quality self-test. Code blue-gray. Repeat code blue-gray. Everyone hit your vent test toggles now unless you enjoy breathing through wet cloth. Doors opened outside, voices muttered, complained, obeyed. Voices, one by one, local fans spun up through the walls, a rising mechanical chorus. Sophia's panel display lit with dozens of simultaneous test pings, exactly the noise storm he needed. He injected his spoof script into the surge, masking their room as routine maintenance variants and rerouting a sliver of power from hallway sanitizers into their core feed. The map pulse steadied from violet to bright blue. Varya watched the feed and exhaled once. Upload channel stabilized, treaty monitor handshake in progress. A heavy knock hit their door, authoritative and impatient. Director Thorne, a clerk's voice called through the metal. By order of arbitration review, surrender unregistered intelligence artifact for secure transfer. Sophia kept one hand inside the vent panel and raised his voice just enough. Can't open. Running live air scrub tests per dispatch, unless you want Central to log you overriding safety compliance. Silence. Muffled consultation. Bureaucratic fear of blame, working exactly as designed. Varya's mouth twitched, approving. She keyed her comm to public channel and spoke with clipped authority that could cut steel. This unit is under intelligence, custodial protection, and treaty relay in active handshake. Interference is a cord obstruction. You will wait. Another pause, longer. Then the clerk, tight with frustration. Documenting non-cooperation. Document accurately, Varya said. That will be new for your office. The footsteps retreated 2 paces, but did not leave. Sophia finished the splice, sealed the panel, and wiped his hands on a rag. His heart was still hammering, but the beat had purpose now. On the table, the Corps projected refugee lanes across his cramped room, blue paths crawling over kettle, chair, and scarred tabletop like history, reclaiming floor space. Varya stepped beside him, close enough that their shoulders touched as they watched the transfer bar climb 1 hard-earned % at a time, while drones waited outside, and a whole residential stack breathed through borrowed minutes. The transfer bar reached 31%, then stalled so abruptly that Sophia heard his own pulse louder than the wall fan. Varya's fingers moved across her cuff in precise bursts, feeding command-level cipher fragments into the relay tunnel, while her other hand stayed near her sidearm, muzzle down, but ready. Outside the door, the enforcement team shifted weight and whispered to each other, the small frictions of fabric and armor plate carrying through thin metal. Inside, his room smelled of warm circuitry, detergent, and the sharp mineral tang of overheated batteries. "Come on," he muttered at the core, as if stubborn hardware listened better when challenged. The transfer bar twitched to 32. At 3:47 dockering time, every vent in Stack 12 gave a synchronized groan as Central attempted the first atmosphere throttle. The room pressure dipped, shallow but unmistakable. A second later, dozens of local scrubber tests kicked harder in response thanks to Mira's building-wide code blue-gray call, and the dip corrected before dizziness could spread. Sophia glanced at the wall panel. They just tried it. Varya didn't look away from the feed. My injunction hit adjudication queue 9 seconds ago. They tested whether fear would outrun law. Did it? Not tonight. The transfer rose to 40, then 51, then jumped to 63 when the treaty monitor on the far end accepted Varya's cross-signed authentication key and opened high-bandwidth intake. The core's hum deepened until the tabletop vibrated under Sophia's fingertips. Heat shimmered above the improvised cradle. Another knock hit the door. Harder this time. The same clerk voice came through, strained thin. Director Thorne, arbitration requests immediate confirmation that this unit remains safe for occupancy. Varya keyed external audio and answered without raising her volume. Occupancy safe. Coercive throttle recorded. You will include that line in your report. A pause. Then, quietly, recorded. Sophia heard the difference in that one word. Fear had changed desks. The transfer completed with a clean 2-tone chime at 4:02. Varya's display populated with treaty receipt stamps from 3 independent monitors, each one carrying time hash seals that could not be edited without triggering public audit alarms. Beneath them, a 4th line appeared in red and then flipped to gray. Ward Protocol. 9 seizure authority suspended pending accord review. Neither of them spoke for 3 full breaths. Then, Sophia sat down hard in the metal chair and laughed once, stunned and exhausted. My mop closet just broke a protocol regime. Varya let out a breath that sounded almost like she'd been bracing against impact for years. Your mop closet exposed one. Different thing. She sent the completed package to chamber records, then mirrored it to labor deck legal aid and sanitation dispatch. No shadows, no single point control, nowhere clean to bury it again. Sophia recognized the tactic from field logistics, redundancy as survival. His maintenance pad pinged with an incoming message from Mira. He opened it and read aloud. You are officially listed as hazard transfer complete. 1 battery sacrificed in service of breathable democracy. She added a wrench icon. Varya's ears tipped forward, curious. Battery status? He checked the cart readout. Cooked. Dead as station poetry. Log it for reimbursement. He gave her a look. You think they reimburse labor decks for historical justice? I think I now sign the reimbursement chain. A fresh alert flashed across her cuff, this one from Operations Clerk Leth. Varya read, then angled the screen toward him. Leth had attached the source audit for the unsigned message from the closet emitter. Routed by Thorn_Varya via blind local channel. No header per OPSEC. Hold position message verified. Sophia huffed. So you were the ghost note. I needed you still alive and not explaining yourself to drones. She met his eyes. I would prefer your irritation over your obituary. The enforcement team remained outside until Varya opened the door herself and stepped into the corridor with enough authority to bend posture around her. She gave clipped instructions. No seizure, no transfer, no contact with the core without treaty warrant. The adjudicator drone projected a legal query in the air. She answered with receipt hashes and the suspended seizure notice. Its lens dimmed, recalculated, and retracted. 2 residents from down the hall watched from their doorways, still in sleep shirts, vent toggles in hand. One of them, an elderly freight sorter with grease on his cuffs, looked from Sophia to Varya and said, So we were all nearly choked for paperwork. Not nearly, Sophia said, because you hit your test switches. The old man gave a single curt nod and disappeared back inside with the satisfied expression of someone who had done his part and expected no speech about it. By 4:36, dawn cycle light from the station's artificial arc had begun to cool from deep amber to pale white. Varya and Sophia stood in Chamber Annex 3, a narrow hearing room that smelled of polished resin and nervous administrators. He had never been this far into upper-tier governance space. The carpet absorbed footfall sound so completely it made everyone seem to glide. He preferred decks that admitted weight. Council officials lined one side, ministry legal on the other, military clerks at terminals, treaty monitors as remote holographic panes along the back wall. At center, the recovered map rendered in rotating scale above a secure dais, no longer hidden behind solvent racks. Every route tag was visible. Every erased convoy lane had names now. When the first ministry advocate tried to call the cache fabrication, a treaty monitor interrupted and projected chain of custody from Sophia's closet to Stack 12 to Annex transfer, including environmental metadata and wall composite age signatures. The old patch compound, the disguised reinforcement plate, the 6-year dormant node, all logged and matched. The advocate sat down before finishing the sentence. A second official attempted damage control through classification language. The adjudication AI itself responded through neutral audio. Classification cannot retroactively nullify pre-existing accord obligations once independent audit trigger is complete. The chamber went still. Then came the amnesty ruling. Automatic, immediate, and public. Custodians of suppressed refugee route intelligence were protected witnesses under treaty law, immune from retaliatory detention or labor reassignment. Sophia watched the words appear, black text on white field, and felt a knot he had carried since the hatch first slammed finally start to loosen. Sanctions followed. Not theatrical, not loud. Budget freezes, command reviews, archive seizure warrants, mandatory testimony schedules, structural consequences, exactly where structural harm had lived. When questions turned to him, Sophia answered in plain maintenance language. What he touched, what he moved, what he did not alter. He listed each physical item with the same care he used for shift inventory. The telescoping wrench remained his and had not contacted data surfaces. The foam canister stayed sealed and unused in his cart. The cart battery had been expended as emergency parallel feed and submitted for forensics. The microfiber padding around the core was bagged and logged for residue analysis. The thermal wrap from Varia's arm was surrendered with chain timestamp because it had touched operational equipment during transit. The jacket he had used as axle wedge in the shaft was retrieved by maintenance and tagged as contaminated utility cloth, then released back to him after scan. Nothing left ambiguous. He also submitted the unsent draft ticket labeled Mop Head Inventory Variance, the one he had cached when trapped in the closet. The room's lead auditor read it, blinked once at the timestamp, and entered it into record as corroborating evidence of early non-network detection. A tiny thing, maybe, but tiny things were where honest timelines lived. External contacts closed, one by one, on the chamber record. Mira from dispatch confirmed the code blue-gray broadcast and resident compliance response, then received formal commendation despite sounding annoyed about it. Clark Leth testified to filing the procedural hold against transfer and admitted, with visible dread, that they had expected career fallout. Treaty Council instead designated the action protected lawful intervention. Even the corridor clerk who had threatened documentation testified, voice tight, that Varya had warned them to record accurately, and that Central had attempted throttle language before injunction arrived. No one in the chamber could claim they had not known. When the presiding arbiter asked Director Thorne to define Sofia Garcia's role for permanent record, she rose, shoulders squared, pain hidden behind sheer discipline, and answered into open mics. Operational partner, she said. Co-custodian. Without him, the routes were ash in a locked system by dawn. There were looks after that, sharp and classed and surprised, but no one challenged the wording. Too much had already been made visible. The final order came just after 6 o'clock. Ward Protocol 9 was dismantled as an autonomous compliance regime and replaced with constrained review architecture requiring mixed caste oversight and human equivalent discretionary checks. The phrase was bureaucratic, bloodless. The effect was not. When Sophia and Varya left Annex 3, station noise had changed. Not calmer, exactly. Wider. People were talking across rank lanes that had stayed quiet for years. On the labor deck return tram, 2 mechanics argued about treaty clauses, while a courier in polished boots pretended not to listen and failed. Sophia's quarters door was still scuffed, where enforcement had braced outside it. Inside, his room looked smaller after chamber light, but also steadier. The core was gone into treaty archive under monitored escrow. His cart sat by the wall with 1 dead battery removed and tagged for replacement. The mop bucket had been cleaned and returned to service, caution sticker peeling at the edge. His wrench rested on the shelf where he always kept it. No relics, just tools again. Varya stood in the doorway for a moment, then set a slim data slate on his table. Joint Post Authorization, she said. Refugee Corridor Reconstruction Office. Field Mapping, Maintenance Integration, Archive Recovery. It reports to treaty monitors and labor infrastructure both. Sophia picked up the slate and skimmed. His name sat beside hers at the top, equal font, equal clearance tier inside the project boundary. He looked up slowly. You're serious? I moved my command request an hour ago. She tilted her head toward the corridor. Unit 12B is vacant. I declined upper-tier reassignment and claimed adjacency. Beside my quarters. Beside your quarters. He leaned against the table, fatigue finally arriving in full, heavy, and clean. Galaxy wants to promote me from janitor to cartographer. It could at least stop hiding history in mop closets. This time, she smiled without surprise. Small, but unguarded. She stepped closer and offered her hand, claws sheathed, palm open in formal wolf pledge. Sophia placed his work-scarred hand against hers. Warmth, callous, pressure, mutual and deliberate. Then we map it in the open, she said. He squeezed once, agreement sealed, and outside their doors, Dockring 9 kept humming, battered and imperfect, and finally, for one morning at least, honest about where its roads had always been.